Delighted to be here with you. I'm Dr. Matt Silverstein, and I am one of the founders and director of the Spiritual and Depth Psychology specialization here at Antioch University in Los Angeles. And I want to, first of all, just acknowledge that the city of Los Angeles is under a lot of stress right now, um, remarkably so. And so there might be some people who are directly impacted by the conflicts that have erupted around the what probably many experience as a hostile intrusion of the government into the city management, and and many might be directly impacted by that. And we just want to hold space for that in this talk, and to maybe appreciate that this talk the uh, on the impact of political turbulence and disturbance on all of us in different ways is a social reality that we have to contend with, and particularly if you are a vulnerable group, as immigrants are, as people of color are, and particularly today, Dr. Fanny Brewster will be talking about impacts to not only but including people of African ancestry, African Americans, and the unconscious factors that can inform the perpetuation of institutionalized and systemic racism. Many people may think it's a good idea that we should just somehow stop being racist, and we even have a government in place that somehow thinks that racism works in particular and really fascinating ways, and that somehow it can also be erased as a historical factor. And for any of us who study depth psychology, there's an awareness that that's not how it works, that there are, for better and for worse, there's an unconscious, including a collective and cultural unconscious, that has deeply entrenched associations to what we call even race. And so, how do we, as people interested in depth psychology, become more proactive in our ability to dismantle oppression with an appreciation of its presence and persistence and even potential within the unconscious? And so Dr. Brewster has really been a um, a leader in this discussion, um, particularly in the realm of Jungian psychology. Um, Dr. Brewster began speaking with our community here, the spiritual and depth psychology and larger Antioch community, back in 2017. And so this is kind of like become a tradition. And she's been, in a way, a guiding light and support for the specialization. And I want to say, for me personally, and I cherish the friendship that we have. It's very meaningful. I want to also just give a nod to the behind the scenes folks at the spiritual and depth psychology specialization. Selena Jaques, who's our affiliate faculty, who's recently joined us, and Nicole Harmon, who is a graduate student who supports us, and without whom we would be um, uh, it would be harder to function. So thank you, everyone, including the continuing ed department at Antioch University, and Ingrid Ingerson, who's been really supportive of helping to organize this event. I'd like to introduce more formally Dr. Brewster, who is joining us from Philadelphia, I believe, today. And Dr. Fanny Brewster is a Jungian analyst and professor at Pacifica Graduate Institute. She's a writer of nonfiction books, including Race and the Unconscious, an Africanist depth psychology perspective on dreaming, The Racial Complex, a Jungian perspective on culture and race, Archetypal Grief, Slavery's Legacy of Intergenerational Child Loss, and African Americans and Jungian Psychology Leaving the Shadows, as well as Racial Legacies, Jung, Politics, and Culture, which was co-authored. Her poems have been published in various journals and in Psychological Perspectives, where she was the featured poet. Dr. Brewster is an international speaker and workshop presenter on Africanist and Jungian psychology topics. She is a Cave Canem Fellow and recipient of the Fay Lectures Honorarium. I want to also mention that today's conversation will be somewhere between 2 and 3 hours. We'll see how it goes. And if you could remain flexible with us around that, that would be really helpful. And so I wanted to say it's my great honor to introduce Dr. Fanny Brewster.
Thank you, Matt. Yeah, thank you, Selena, and Nicole also. It's so good to see you all today. Are you able to hear me well enough? Yeah, okay, that's good. Those of you that are off camera, oh, I love that, Jalen. If you could come on camera for a moment so that I can just see you, and yeah, and just even if you're sleepy in your pajamas, out walking, drinking coffee, whatever you're doing, just so I could see your faces. It's fine. I mean, unless you're sick and you're just not able to come on. Because it feels like, especially with Antioch, I remember being in the room uh, a few years ago. It's been a few years now. And being there in person and being connected with everyone there, such a warm feeling. So I do like seeing faces on Zoom when I can, because I think it helps to bring me back to those times when I was actually in a space. And I think about the hotel, which is kind of like down the road from from Antioch, where I stay when I come there, uh, which is kind of cool, because it's within walking distance. So I don't know, it just feels good to see you all, see your faces. What I'd like to do today is, and we'll see how this goes. I typically don't work like this. Um, I usually do a reading, and I had a reading I could do. It's from my new book. It's not published yet, but it will be. It's called The Racial Psyche, deepening the work of the racial complex, which I had done a good amount of work with Antioch when I came there. And so I'm trying to deepen that work of the complex by looking at the racial psyche and looking at the broadness of how raciality actually exists in the psyche. Like it's not just in our complexes as we think about them. Um, so what I'd like to do today, a bit different, I have segments that I'm going to read from a book that I actually fell in love with. It's called Autobiography of a People. How many of you know this book? Are you familiar with it? No? Um, the subtitle, Three Centuries of African American History Told by Those Who Lived It, Autobiography of a People. And I kind of discovered it when I was looking for other books in preparation for teaching at Pacifica. And I saw this book title and I thought, oh, that looks interesting. So I bought it. And so this is the first time I'm using it so extensively. But what I'd like to do, I have marked off like maybe at least 20 different parts that I'd like to read from. I won't read from all of them, but the words of these individuals, I think, are so important for us, partly because I'm fascinated with history. And a part of history for me was always from the perspective of um, a voice that came out of colonialism, right? A voice that came not from Black people, like those voices were not in the books, they were not in the stories, except within my own cultural group, um, that I could hear. So to be able to hear the voices of Black people in their own words talk, of course I have that, right? Like I have here, I might read something from Lucille Clifton, one of my favorite poets, right? So of course I hear Black voices and I grew up with Black voices, especially because I grew up in a segregated environment and but culturally rich for me within my own family and friends. Um, but it's exciting for me to have a book that goes from someone who arrived on a slave ship all the way through to Malcolm X and even beyond, and just to share some of the history of Africanist people from people in their own voices. I found out so much more than I ever thought I don't think I know that much anyhow, but I found out so much more from history of Africanist people from this book. So it kind of takes us along the way from beginning kind of to end of a history journey. Um, some parts of it I'll read, it'll be longer, some parts of it I'll cut. But I'd like to read segments from different voices here and then have us have conversation so that it really is a call response moment. And I think that what's playing out I think it's paramount that predominantly the situation is happening in that part of LA. um, it brings back so many recollections around um, the struggles and the turmoils. It reminds me of Dr. King and Selma, the March from Selma. You know, it's just we are always in the struggle. And I think that this is um, what we want. Some of us want to forget, but many of us, we cannot forget, right? That we are still in the struggle. Okay, so I'll begin. This first piece is from Olada Equiana, who was captured in Africa as a slave, brought over as a slave. I was born in the year 1745. The distance of this province from the capital of Benin and the seacoast must be very considerable, for I had never heard of white men or Europeans, nor of the sea, and our subjection to the king of Benin was little more than nominal. Every transaction of the government, as far as my slender observation extended, was conducted by the chiefs or elders of the place. The manners and government of a people who have little commerce with other countries are generally very simple, and the history of what passes in one family or village may serve as a specimen of the whole nation. My father was one of those elders or chiefs of whom I have spoken and was styled Embrich, a term, as I remember, importing the highest distinction and signifying our language, a mark of grandeur. This mark is conferred on the person entitled to it by cutting the skin across at the top of the forehead and drawing it down to the eyebrows and applying a warm hand to it while in this situation and rubbing it until it shrinks up into a thick wale across the lower part of the forehead. Most of the judges and senators were thus marked. My father had long borne this badge. I had seen it conferred on one of my brothers, and I also was destined to receive it by my parents. We are almost a nation of dancers, musicians, and poets, Every great event, such as a trumpet return from battle or other cause of public rejoicing, is celebrated in public dancing, which are accompanied with songs and music suited to the occasion. The assembly is separated into 4 divisions, which dance either apart or in succession, and each with a character peculiar to itself. The first division contains the married men, who in their dances frequently exhibit feats of arms and the representation of a battle. To these succeed the married women, who dance in the second division. The young men occupy the third, and the maidens the fourth. Each represent some interesting scene of real life, such as a great achievement, domestic employment, a pathetic story, or some rural sport. And as this subject is generally founded on some recent event, it is therefore ever new. This gives our dancers a spirit and variety which I have scarcely seen elsewhere. We have many musical instruments, particularly drums of different kinds, a piece of music which resembles a guitar, and another much like a staccato. These last are chiefly used by betrothed virgins who play on them on all grand festivals. So I'm going to skip a little bit forward. The first object that saluted my eyes when I arrived on the coast was the sea and a slave ship, which was then riding at anchor and waiting for its cargo. These filled me with astonishment that was soon converted into terror, which I am yet at a loss to describe, and much more the then feelings of my mind when I was carried on board. I was immediately handled and tossed up to see if I was sound by some of the crew, and I was now persuaded that I had gotten to a world of bad spirits and that they were going to kill me. Their complexions, too, differing so much from ours, their long hair and the language they spoke, which was very different from any I had ever heard, united to confirm me in this belief. Indeed, such were the horrors of my views and fears at the moment that if 10,000 worlds had been my own, I would have freely parted with them all to have exchanged my condition with the meanest slave in my own country. When I looked around the ship too and saw a large furnace or copper boiling and a multitude of black people of every description chained together, every one of their countenances expressing dejection and sorrow, I no longer doubted of my fate, and quite overpowered with horror and anguish, I fell motionless on the deck and fainted. When I recovered a little, I found some black people about me who I believed were some of those who brought me on board and had been receiving their pay. They talked to me in order to cheer me, but all in vain. I asked them if we were not to be eaten by those white men with horrible looks, red faces, and long hair. They told me I was not, and one of the crew brought me a small portion of spirituous liquor in a wine glass, but being afraid of him, I would not take it out of his hand. One of the blacks therefore took it from him and gave it to me, and I took a little down my palate, which instead of reviving me as they thought it would, threw me into the greatest consternation at the strange feeling it produced, having never tasted any such liquor before. Soon after this, the blacks who brought me on board went off and left me abandoned to despair. I now saw myself deprived of all chance of returning to my native country, or even the least glimpse of gaining the shore, which I now considered as friendly. And I even wished for my former slavery in preference to my present situation, which was filled with horrors of every kind, still heightened by my ignorance of what I was to undergo. I was not long suffered to indulge my grief. as I was soon put down under the decks, and there I received such a salutation in my nostrils as I had never experienced in my life, so that with the loathsomeness of the stench and with my crying together, I became so sick and low that I was not able to eat, nor had I the least desire to taste anything. I now wished for the last friend, death, to relieve me, but soon to my grief, two of the white men offered me eatables, and on my refusing to eat, one of them held me fast by the hands and laid me across. I think the windlass, and tied my feet, while the other flogged me severely. I had never experienced anything of this kind before, and although not being used to the water, I naturally feared that element the first time I saw it. Yet nevertheless, could I have got over the nettings, I would have jumped over the side, but I could not. And besides, the crew used to watch us very closely, who were not chained down to the decks, lest we should leap into the water. I'm going to stop there. So this is the entry into America. It's the African Holocaust, right? This is the entry for millions of ancestors who came to America. And I know oftentimes I hear people say, well, that was slavery and that was then, and now we are done, we are finished. And I say that this experience of the African Holocaust has not come to an end for so many of us, right? It's a part of our American experience. And with psychology, with Jungian psychology, we are taught, we hear complexes don't go away, experiences don't go away. We know trauma doesn't just disappear, right? Trauma stays with us. We work with it, we change it, we find places to comfort ourselves, but it doesn't go away. And the idea that for literally generations, we tried to erase a Holocaust and say in the history, right, in the history books, oh, that was no big deal. That was just slavery. And I'm saying it like that because that's kind of how it was presented for so long. And yet we have so much of the repercussions of it. So um, this might be a difficult place for us to begin. But let's begin there. Let's begin with um, what I just read. If you have um, anything you'd like to say about perhaps, maybe I'll give you a prompt about it. Like, what was your experience of learning about the African Holocaust? Because that's what it was. I don't think no one was calling it that, right? And people still don't call it that, but I think that's what it was. So, anywhere you'd like to start with this? With from what I've read and really talk about your own personal experiences because that's why we're here together to share and talk with that voice. So you can unmute yourselves and just jump in. Yes.
Hi, I'm Stella Park, and um, the the passage you read was very heavy for Sunday morning, but yeah, it's beautifully written and kind of like brought me to the ship of slavery. and I kind of like experienced the pain and despair of the person who were in the ship.
Mhm.
And that just brought me to the experiences that I had in the African American Museum in Washington, D.C. I confess that I wasn't that much interested or had like awareness of the pains and sufferings of African Americans up to that moment. But somehow, all the exhibitions and the narrations that I saw that day was like literally made me feel the pains of our ancestors. One of the very African Americans who are brought to this new continent, and I literally bowed 3 times to the people who suffered. And for an Asian American, we thought we did something for the human rights of this country, but we didn't do much. And we just like in Korean, I'm a Korean American, and there's a expression in Korea that when we didn't fight actually for the right of something and kind of like take the seat on the train without paying any money, we call it like to put the chopsticks on the table for free. And I felt like I was one of that when it comes to the human rights of the United States. And whenever I see African Americans since then, I literally like, just bow and remember the pains that they carry. And, thanks to you, because of you, we are living in this country freely like this. And when the like Black Lives Matter movement was going on, I could be really like allying with people. It's not only their issues, it's my problem, my issues, so that I should be take part.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Stella. Yeah, yeah, thank you.
Um, I think it's so much to take in. It's hard to find where to start sharing. But I really appreciated hearing the story in such sort of stark like detail, because I think we all sort of try to gloss over that and say, oh yes, it was really bad. Oh yes, it was terrible. But without describing it, without putting ourselves there, and without having that like very somatic, like mindful practice of this is what it smelled like. And this is like what the water represented, there's something really important about really being there and understanding it in a different way because of that.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I think that was one of the true things that was taken away from us in the history, right? In the history of slavery, like really like being able to read a story like that of someone from 1745, an African who was kidnapped, taken from his family and brought over. And I think through the 70s, we started getting more language, more stories about the true history of what happened. Um, and I think all of it is, of course, it's still not there because there was so much of a desire to repress the history of the African Holocaust, right? So we could have one more comment if we'd like, or anything you'd like to say from this section. I'll read something else now. I'll move us forward with another piece.
I have something to add. That's okay.
Yeah, that's fun. No, it's better than okay. It's
So, for my like history with African American culture and just going through the history of slavery of what they presented to us, like I grew up in the Black community, single mother kind of stereotype, and it wasn't really culturally rich, something that you kind of touched on, and it just really didn't have any type, I mean, besides like music, right? Like I feel like sometimes music and art does bring it back together, but to understand the depths of the richness of African American culture is really important. But for a lot, for specific reasons, it's like I'm very sensitive to these subjects. And so there's been many times I've shied away from learning, reading more about it. I just feel so deeply, you know what I mean? And even just to the point where they were talking about their love, like so many instances of distrust that was like not really implemented in, you know, in their awareness, but ultimately that's just how the conditioning started. And even just thinking about my conditioning, when I started to feel distrust in my own family from their unawareness of what our culture, our environment does to you. So it's just really interesting because I'm like, wow, you know, I can see how that feeling, even, you know, more recently, all the way back in the, you know, 1700s, how that feeling can still be so relevant, right? And yeah, it's heartbreaking. It was beautifully written and told, and yeah, to be so descriptive, it's like I could never imagine really, truly what it was like to be in that position. And I'm so grateful to even be here. And, you know, so many people are so like, it's this world is crazy and, you know, it's so bad. I'm like, really? Because I think it was worse. I think this is about as good as we have gotten it so far. It could definitely be better, but we're so blessed to be in this space to where we're actually, you know, I know it's kind of like, you know, there's a conversation around enslavement and it's different, right? Like it might be more mentally or spiritually or even socially, but ultimately, like we are so much more freer than what we had back then, and there's things to say about that for the people who came before us. But yeah, it's a lot of things are coming up. I'm feeling very emotional about it, but I'm glad to be here to hear about it as I'm going on my journey through. I just started at Antioch University, and I will be specializing in spiritual and depth psychology. And even within my first, I believe it was the second week of class, I just had this download of, even through Freudian, you know, the Freudian work framework and talking about super egos. And I just had this download of being like, oh, people of color or Black people have this outbalanced super ego. It's so much more larger because we've been conditioned to having to know the societal rules, so that, and it probably comes from slavery. Like I haven't looked too deep into it, but it does definitely feel like I had to realize that within myself. I'm so socially aware that I sometimes am masking so much that, you know what I mean? It gets, so anyway, I won't go into that, but it's been very interesting and I'm excited to learn more. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Is it Shyla?
Shia.
Shaya.
Yeah.
Shaya. Okay. Yeah, thank you for that, Shaya.
Yeah.
And good luck with your program and
Thank
your
you.
new beginning. Yeah, you're welcome. Yeah, I think there is something about trust, and I think it also connected to the language we use, you know. Like sometimes I remember, I don't know, I was young, you know, younger. Um, and I hear people say it, not as much nowadays, but like working like a slave, you know, that expression, like working like a slave. And I just go, those are words that should never come out of a person of color's mouth, certainly for sure. And it goes back to what you're saying, Shia, you know, about how emotionally painful it is, right? When we really get the details, and it's what Selena was saying, when we get the details of slavery and the slave ship and the hold that they were in. And in that moment, it's like there's no such thing as working like a slave, right? That doesn't exist in my life, not in the way it existed for my ancestors. In the unconscious, in these psychological spaces of the unconscious, yes, I have ancestral DNA, and I have the essence of a racial complex and racialized psyche and a master slave archetype. Like these things and more are existing through me, through and my descendants and my ancestors, right? But in no way, shape, or form um, have I ever worked like a slave. So I think there's an honoring, and more of us all the time are honoring the ancestors for what they went through and what they endured. Yeah. Okay. So I'm gonna move on to another part. I'll read another segment for us of something else. Let's see. I had a part to read from Nat Turner, a revolutionist. Someone would say he was not a good person because of what he did, but we know him historically as someone who was an early fighter against slavery. This is from a book called Confessions of Nat Turner, Virginia, 1831. I'm going to just read a small part of this. He talks about being a slave, and he talks about being spiritually connected with God, right? And how from an early age he was really, he felt that he was called by God to have a particular purpose in life and a particular focus on his condition of being a slave and the condition of Black people around him. So this is from 1831. This is the last segment of this part, Nat Turner. Since the commencement of 1830, I had been living with Mr. Joseph Travis, who was to me a kind master and placed the greatest confidence in me. In fact, I had no cause to complain of his treatment to me. On Saturday evening, the 20th of August, it was agreed between Henry Hark and myself to prepare a dinner the next day for the men we expected, and then to concert a plan, as we had not yet determined on any. Hark, on the following morning, brought a pig, and Henry brandy, and being joined by Sam, Nelson, Will, and Jack, they prepared in the woods a dinner where about 3 o'clock I joined them. I saluted them on coming up, and I asked Will, how came he here? He answered, his life was worth no more than others, and his liberty as dear to him. I asked him if he thought to obtain it. He said he would, or lose his life. This was enough to put him in full confidence. Jack, I knew, was only a tool to the hands of Hark. It was quickly agreed we should commence at home. Mr. J. Travis on that night, and until we had armed and equipped ourselves and gathered sufficient force Neither age nor sex was to be spared, which was invariably adhered to. We remained at the feast until about 2 hours in the night, when we went to the house and found Austin. They all went to the cider press and drank, except myself. On returning to the house, Hark went to the door with an axe for the purpose of breaking it open, as we knew we were strong enough to murder the family if they were awaked by the noise. But reflecting that it might create an alarm in the neighborhood, we determined to enter the house secretly and murder them while sleeping. Hark got a ladder and set it against the chimney, on which I ascended, and hoisting a window, entered and came downstairs, unbarred the door, and removed the guns from their places. It was then observed that I must spill the first blood, on which, armed with a hatchet and accompanied by Will, I entered my master's chamber. It being dark, I could not give a death blow. The hatchet glanced from his head. He sprang from the bed and called his wife. It was his last word. Will laid him dead with a blow of his axe, and Mrs. Travis shared the same fate as she lay in bed. Nat Turner, an African American whom many considered in later years a revolutionary, um, and many considered a murderer for going in and killing the white family that held him enslaved. And from his accounts, he said that they did not treat him poorly or badly. So I want us to think about Nat Turner, right? And think about him within the context of being a Black man slave in the 1830s, right? 1830s. And think about, we have the context, kind of like the baseline of the African Holocaust. And by the 1830s, so many Black people, Africanist people, had been held in slavery for decades, generations, right? So when we look at Nat Turner and think about what he did, I want us to think about the American Revolution and think about indigenous people who were murdered in America. I want us to think about the blood on American soil, right? So I think that it's important to look at America with eyes wide open, not the kind of softened look that we give America in its beginnings, because America there's always been blood in the soil, right? And I think that that's something that that has also been denied as a part of our history. And so when we look at historical figures like Nat Turner, and we look at other people, we'll get a quote from Malcolm X later on. Like when we look at individuals of color who have said, enough is enough, and I no longer want this, I think we have to have their words be a part of the language of American history that looks at the suffering of people of color, Africanist people, through the plantation years and all of that. So let's have one or two comments about what you might think about this. How many of you have heard about Nat Turner? Oh, okay, several of you. Yeah. So what do you think? What do you think about 1831, Nat Turner? the murder of the slaveholders that had him, blood on the American soil, um, blood of indigenous people. Like, what do you think? Yeah, Holly.
Something that occurred to me as you were reading that, and you read it beautifully. It felt like with the way that he writes it and the creation of the dinner, and they got together and they planned this, and also his preliminary statement that 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 these were actually kind people in you know, he paints them in a positive way, as if to say, you know, it wasn't about them. This was something bigger. And it almost felt like a ritual or some sort of, you know, sacrifice for freedom and for what was considered in his mind perhaps the right thing.
Mhm.
Spiritually, you know, humanly, that even if these are kind people, that this had to be done, and there was no other way.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
that's kind of what I think of that.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. It's I think part of a hard story, Martha. I'm gonna call you next, right? Like it's kind of a hard story. Um, Nat Turner's words in his story, right? Because it is about the killing of the other. It is about the murder of the other, right? So where do we put that in our consciousness? When we think about just about murder, we think about killing the other. And in the psychology language, right, we talk about other, right? Jungians in more recent years have, and others also in psychoanalysis have talked about capital O, other, the other, right? So in relationship with the other, like how do we reconcile murder? But how do we reconcile genocide? Because I think that's a part of what we'd be looking at. Yeah. And so, Martha?
Yeah, hi. I'm Martha. I'm from Antioch, New England, from an alum from years ago. But I'm glad to be here, and I sort of tying the two readings that you did together. I grew up in the 1960s, and I went to an elementary school that was purposefully integrated, and we talked a lot about the history of slavery. And what struck me as interesting is, and maybe it wasn't known as, or it wasn't known more about what the slave ships were like, and I since have learned, but not that that piece wasn't taught. And what was taught was at some point, and I don't remember when, they stopped being able to take human beings on a ship and bring them here, and that was sort of the compromise. And I wonder if there was some sense of the horror of what was going on that just never got brought forward. Maybe that's a hopeful look. And what's interesting in the way you're talking about Nat Turner, what I was taught about Nat Turner was, of course he did that. Like, of course he did that. What other choice did he have? And he's not describing good people. He's describing people who weren't cruel to him, and yet he was an enslaved person. And when you're talking about the murder of the other, and the murder on American soil, and the cruelty that continues to this day in the American culture, it seems heartbreaking to me that what else could he have done? And I think that's probably a true statement. And anyway, yeah, I agree. Exactly. You can't be kind and own people. Exactly. Eh, that,
Mm,
yeah, anyway, that's what resonates with me is the
mm,
cultural horror of America on so many different fronts. And at
mm,
some points it feels like, what else can you do? Anyway, that I don't
mm.
know if that makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. Thank you, Martha. Yeah, thank you. Tanya, yeah,
Yeah.
Tanya.
Hi,
Hi.
Dr. Brewster.
Hi.
Hi. Good to
Hi.
see you.
It's good to see you too.
So I mean, what I'm struck by in that reading that passage and also linking it back to the first reading is this idea of goodness that permeates like white culture and how it to this day, the idea of plantation tours and the idea that you could be good to enslave people. Therefore,
Mm-hmm.
what else would they have wanted for?
Mm-hmm.
And there's something here about the shadow and these binaries of good, bad, right, wrong. And goodness isn't the point. It's not the point. You can't be good to me and restrict my sovereignty, my freedom, my choice, my
Mm-hmm.
exploration of my world, the universe. It's an impossibility.
Mm-hmm.
And the idea that, yeah, to be good is some kind of get out of jail free card or just some kind of escape clause
Mm-hmm.
in this mandate of horror is an abomination. And the shadow, it's like the way that slavery, Black people, brown people get relegated to this shadow aspect of the US and US history, whereas goodness, white, moves away and apart. And I'm interested very much now in my own work as a therapist and clients who come in with having done shadow work. I did my shadow work, I've explored, and reminding them that the shadow is never anything that gets done away with. You never, the shadow does not disappear. You may come into a relationship with and have an ongoingness with the shadow,
Mm-hmm.
but there will never be enough exploration, books written, like monuments erected to relegate the history of chattel slavery in the US into it's away and it's done. We've repented. This is always going to be part and parcel
Mm-hmm.
of the roots, the genetic encoding of this country. And yeah, to me, hearing that passage, it's like, yeah, they were good or not good. It doesn't matter. It's not the point.
Mm-hmm.
It's about sovereignty. And there's a choice that he was forced into making. And that is what it is.
Mm-hmm. I really thank you for that. I really appreciate those words, genetic encoding, right? The genetic encoding of the American psyche, because it is here, it is in the land, it is in the air that we still breathe. I think there's some aspects of it that's happening, I mean, in almost every part of the world, especially it happens to be intensely available for us to see right now in California. But it's there because it's part of a racial psyche, and it's part of that imprint that is a part of our unconscious, a part of our psyche. And the more like we understand it, you know, all of us here are depth psychology people. We understand it. The more we push things down, what happens? The more it erupts, right? Jung talked about that, especially in terms of complexes. Like we're thinking one thing, we don't want to say it, we're trying not to say it, and sure enough, it just flips out of our mouth. And we think, oh my God, I can't believe I said that. That's not what I wanted to say. And yet there it is. And so it happens like that because of the complexes, right? And I've talked about the racial complex. I wrote the book about it to kind of bring awareness to that experience that we have of what's going on at an unconscious level. Like it is in our DNA. Yeah. So thank you, Tanya. Yeah. Jalen.
Hi, everybody. I'm an alumni of Antioch and Pacifica, so super happy to be here. Tanya, I loved your point. I want to dovetail on that. I was absolutely fascinated by the plantation that recently burned down and the postings on Instagram and other social media about what it meant for African American people and what it meant for white people. And the comments were absolutely fascinating to me. And the idea of the other, it was sort of African American people saying, we are the other, and white people saying, yeah, we're the other, right? Everybody had their place about being the other in that conversation. And I thought, oh, it's where you stand, right? What side, where you stand, what you're looking at around being the other. And I think Tanya's point about it's not about slaveholders being good or bad, it's wrong, right? It's just straight up wrong. And so but I'm not sure that most white folks understand, right, from that vantage point. It's not about whether it was good or bad or people were hurt or not. It was much bigger than that. And the burning of that plantation and the reaction just was so eye-opening to me about how this country looks at race, history, and how we clean up what we've done, right? So just wanted to throw that out there. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. I saw something a couple of days ago. There's a plantation, I forget which state it's in, they were selling it for $18 million. And I thought, oh, I don't know, it took my breath away. You know, I mean, literally, I like took a deep breath, you know. Yeah, because having a wedding at a plantation and these kinds of things are not like they, I, I can't imagine that, you know, I can't imagine that. Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Jalen. Yeah. Shaya?
Something that popped up in my head that kind of reminded me from a scene from Sinners. I don't know if everyone's seen Sinners, but it was a fantastic movie. But there's a scene where one of the brothers, I believe it's Stack, but he's trying to make a deal, and he's in a store. He has a young lady keep an eye out for his truck, which has, like, I think a bunch of liquor and stuff on it. And he tells her to honk if someone tries to steal from his truck. And so he gets interrupted with this conversation, has to go outside to deal with the people who are trying to steal. And so he finds that he knows the people who are trying to steal from him, but ultimately, sorry if this is a spoiler for anybody who hasn't seen it, but he has to basically make those people, even though he knew them and he could have just been like, all right, well, next time don't do it, he had to make them understand there are consequences to your actions. And I do believe that there are I won't even say most of, the conditioning from slavery where people feel I need to make people responsible for their actions, but I do believe that some people feel like it's their duty to teach someone a lesson, like it's not about good or bad or right or wrong, but it's about, like, I guess, balancing the scales. And I think during that, you know, those instances of just understanding, like, you took so much from me. You don't understand how much you took from me because you felt like maybe you didn't beat me every day, or you weren't the worst, but there's a scale to everything. And I just thought how interesting it was, because it felt like I have to do this. Like, this is, you have to know that there are consequences to your actions. It's not okay that you just do these things and you think that just because you asked me how my day is going, or you didn't, do the worst thing, that is okay. No, there's still consequences. And I think to this day, people still can be that way, but there's an extreme, side, and then there's not so extreme. It's a scale as well. But yeah, I just thought that was really interesting, and it just seemed like I have to do this, like, through his eyes. So yeah, it was just really interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for that. Yeah. I haven't seen Sinner yet. I have to go see it because I have to go see it. Everyone says I need to, and I want to, so I will.
I think it's on. They're actually streaming it now.
It's on
So
streaming. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Okay. I wanna read a piece from a woman whose name all of you I'm sure know, Sojourner Truth, it's from Daughters of Africa. New York City, 1867. My friends, I am rejoiced that you are glad, but I don't know how you will feel when I get through. I come from another field, the country of the slave. They have got their liberty. So much good luck to have slavery partly destroyed, not entirely. I want it root and branch destroyed. Then we will all be free indeed. I feel that if I have to answer for the deeds done in my body just as much as a man, I have a right to have just as much as a man. There is a great stir about colored men getting their rights, but not a word about the colored woman. And if colored men get their rights and not colored women theirs, you see the colored men will be masters over the women, and it will be just as bad as it was before. So I am for keeping the thing going while things are stirring, because if we wait till it is still, it will take a great while to get it going again. White women are a great deal smarter and know more than colored women, while colored women do not know scarcely anything. They go out washing, which is about as high as a colored woman gets, and their men go about idle, strutting up and down, and when the women come home, they ask for their money and take it all, and then scold because there is no food. I want you to consider on that, chillin'. I call you chillin'. You are somebody's chillin', and I am old enough to be mother of all that is here. I want women to have their rights. In the courts, women have no rights, no voice. Nobody speaks for them. I wish women to have their voice there among the pettifoggers. If it is not a fit place for women, it is unfit for men to be there. I am about 80 years old. It is about time for me to be going. I have been 40 years a slave and 40 years free, and I would be here 40 years more to have equal rights for all. I suppose I am kept here because something remains for me to do. I suppose I am yet to help to break the chain. I have done a great deal of work, as much as a man, but did not get so much pay. I used to work in the field and bind grain, keeping up with the cradle. with the cradler, but men doing no more got twice as much pay. We do as much, we eat as much, we want as much. I suppose I am about the only colored woman that goes about to speak for the rights of the colored women. I want to keep the thing stirring now that the ice is cracked. What we want is a little money. You men know that you get as much again as women when you write or for what you do. When we get our rights, we shall not have to come to you for money, for then we shall have money enough in our own pockets, and maybe you will ask us for money. But help us now until we get it. It is a good consolation to know that when we have got this battle once fought, we shall not be coming to you anymore. I'm glad to see that men are getting their rights, but I want women to get theirs. And while the water is stirring, I will step into the pool. Now that there is a great stir about colored men's getting their rights, is the time for women to step in and have theirs. Sojourner Truth from Daughters of Africa, New York City, 1867. Okay. I think probably all I'd have to say is maybe Roe versus Wade. I could say other things too about maternal child care, Black maternal issues, birth issues for Black women, the destruction of Medicaid, the attempt nowadays in the political arena to take away even more rights from women, and Black women have always been, in the bottom of that hierarchical pole, right? So maybe we could think about some of what Sojourner Truth just said, and like as we look a little bit at the history of Sojourner Truth and the movement for voting rights, where it was decided that Black men could get the right to vote. It was different for Black women. And when white women had an opportunity to, because Black women had fought with them during the suffrage movement, to get rights for voting rights for Black people, Black women said, well, white women, excuse me, said, well, we're not so sure about that, right? We're not so sure we want that. That's a part of the history of the suffrage movement. And then I don't know, I could say something about Harris, but this Black woman running for president, right? And Clinton, who also lost, right? So what do you think? What could you say about some of Sojourner Truth's words, or what do you think? Where are we in this moment in the collective? Yeah.
I would like to say something about, what's coming up for me is the idea of when the water is stirring and how I believe there's a notion that we will someday arrive, that there will be this penultimate arrival into, I don't know, Eden, utopia. And as I get older, I'm only now really understanding that I think the water continuously stirs, solidifies, stirring, solidification. And what I see now and I get really interested in is the inheritance of knowledge, if there is any way for generations to actually have a certain kind of claim of knowledge without education that robustly supports. And I'm fascinated with what I see on social media with some generations that are upcoming and trying to figure out, people who identify as women trying to figure out their relationship to the patriarchy and the idea of this, or what we're seeing as a collective movement back to conservative longing, some kind of longing for something that never was. And I get particularly interested for Black women and young Black women who seem to be wanting to emulate these like cultural ideas around men, women, like these norms, these odd ideas around what it means to be a woman, a protected woman, a woman who wants to rest and have a man who provides. And it's really interesting. And if I can zoom back and like intellectualize it and not feel it so much, or like, wow, okay, what am I seeing here? And there does seem to be, which I'm sure we all talk about, this connection to miseducation and underfunding of education, which can therefore create this soil in which these tropes can really spread like weeds. And so right now for me, it just feels like, is this the water stirring, or have we crystallized? And if we're at a point of crystallization, what breaks? How are we going to break this to get this once again flowing and stirring? And maybe also it's both things. Like if, the water at different points is crystallized, and still there's a stirring and a flowing around these real hardened, crystallized points. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you. I really like that image of that Sojourner Truth used, of like while things are being stirred up, let's keep them stirring. And I think I think that's the message, the underlying message that we can get from the collective, right? Like intergenerational trauma happens, so do movements. To me, that's like the underlying of the waters that want to be stirred, the abolitionist movement, all these movements, Black Lives Matter, movements come because there's something going on underneath. And when we think about it psychologically, we're thinking about it as the unconscious, right? But it happens in nature. It happens everywhere. We're a part of nature. And so, yeah, how do we, like the crystals, they could form, but we don't want them to become frozen so that we once again become paralyzed. And the moment that we're in, I kind of politically, right? I think about it like, we've seen this before, men showing up and thinking that um, they could be president again forever, or, empires that are going to last 1,000 years. It doesn't happen, right? It doesn't happen. And so, because there's something in the waters that doesn't want that, it doesn't want the formation of something that can continue to freeze in place, that's so wicked, that's so evil and so hard for so many people. So when you talk about crystallization, Like to me, that's like bits of ice forming, right? It's not something being solidly frozen like rock or like something totally frozen with no movement. I think of us as a part of nature and psyche like we're always moving. There's always a flow happening. And even though we may in the moment feel paralyzed or frozen, I think that we have to create to counter negative psychological complexes, right? That and amnesia, like the complexes when they're in that negative place, want us to forget. It's our work to remember, to have a remembrance. Oh, yes. Um, my ancestors worked on South Carolina slave plantations. That's not where I am today. And what is the consciousness? What kind of an ancestor will I be? To me, that is like, yeah, there's crystals in the water, but it's not frozen. And I have to have a consciousness of flow, right? Like that's my work. That's my job. Yeah. Um, anyone else want to say anything about this?
I'm so glad that you mentioned that, we are moving in some sense, physically, emotionally, animal, human being is one kind of animal, and there's animation, which means like, moving. And in the deepest spiritual realm, I think it means so much things about the reality. I'm a Buddhist, and not only Buddhist, I'm everything. But in the Buddhist concept, it's like everything, nothing is impermanent, which is everything is possible, which gives us a sense of like infinite possibility of everything. So our future is really determined by what kind of causes we are putting in this moment. So if we want the result of Black Lives Matter, and we seen, heard, then what kind of cause we have to put at this moment? That's what we need to focus as an individual and as a collectiveness.
Yes, I think it's true. What do we want? What's our vision? Because a part of I think what happens when the politics and the collective moment is what it is in America, like where we see and around the world, like America has influence around the world. And as I looked at the list of countries that where people were not going to be allowed to come to America the other day. I'm looking at that list and I'm seeing, of course, the bias and the racism that's a part of that immigration list of people who cannot come, people from Haiti, people from Sudan. So many people are suffering in Sudan. Like, why is it that we cannot give um, refuge to those people? People from Cuba, which has been a long time persecution of Cuba. It's just like when I see that, it's like I think we have to hold each other's hands and say this moment, that thing that's going on cannot paralyze us, that we have to hold each other's hands and know that the waters are stirring and things are happening, even though fear is being promoted and suffering is being promoted, that we have to still have trust. That came up earlier today, right? That we have to trust. There is something to trust in that I think has to do with Jung would call it the capital S self archetype, but calling it the divine, calling it the goddess, calling it whatever you want to call it, there is something there that holds us, right? And that's what we have to have faith in. Yeah. Anyone else want to say anything before about this passage before I move on?
have an unformed thought, if that's okay. I'm just thinking about the induction into so-called American psyche and how the enslavement mechanism also served as a kind of induction into this way of being. And that while there was a kind of, I think even there's this idea that we're partially liberated, we're freed, but we're also partially liberated. So enslavement ends as in a certain form, but another kind of enslavement is not dismantled yet. That's kind of what I'm hearing, and that the misogyny and the sexism that manifests as the inequality in pay and all of what that represents is a kind of a symptom. That's how I'm hearing it. It's a symptom of this, a form of American, so-called American psyche that is a kind of a pathology almost. It's because because I'm thinking about the contrast between the first reading, in which you have someone who's in a world in which, well, she's looking forward to having this sort of this initiation that recognizes her value and her place in the tribe. There's nothing that is implied at all about there being a degradation of her experience as a woman. That it just doesn't come across that way. And now you have, not even 100 years later, or however long it is, this other construction, this other idea of womanness. And that even men, like that the men somehow, this even what does it mean to be idle? I think about actually of being so empowered. And so there's even that the absence of recognition of what it does when there's a lack of equality, or even when there's an exploitation of others, including within our own family, what that does to at the soul level. I'm thinking about that. And partly to the last thought is to your last point, Dr. Fanny, which is about the dislocation from spirit in what happens, because there was a whole spirituality. I mean, there were spiritualities that were disrupted, dismantled, and demonized, worse. And so now you have an absence, and then you've inherited a kind of a new religious sensibility, but then that's part of that American system. And it maybe it's also experienced as a kind of a poisonousness or of toxicity at the soul level. And so it doesn't really uplift in some ways, or it does, and I don't know. There's something in there just about what the severing of the connection with the divine, including the feminine divine especially, and how it manifests in this awful way as misogyny, and how to appreciate the intersecting of racism and misogyny here. So I appreciated the reading for that reason and the discussion.
Yeah, I just want to make a correction. Aquiano was a male, was a boy child.
Ooh, the first?
Yes, the first on this
Oh,
list.
geez. Somehow I was just in my mind, I kind of felt a woman. So that's interesting. I don't know what to make of that in the moment.
Yeah, yeah. I don't, the name is so soft to me and so beautiful that to me it seems kind of feminine, but it's masculine, right?
Well, thank you for that correction. I somehow in the storytelling, that's where my mind went. I wonder then, I wonder about sort of womanness in that world context. I'm mistaken, or maybe I'm not. Maybe there is something there that was also, I'm guessing, about, and know a little bit from other contexts, that there was a presence of the feminine as divine
Mm-hmm.
been severely disrupted. But the correction is interesting too.
Yeah. Yeah. And for us to be like to hear Sojourner Truth's words, right? Like and bringing it to um like money on the surface. She talked a lot about getting paid, right? Like I want to be paid in the same way that men are paid. I do more work than they do, actually. That's what she's saying, right? I got cradles to rock. I've had cradles to rock and then go in the field. But they're just getting up and going in the field. And so there's just, we know about equity and the inequality of even today, as we're sitting here talking, between salaries for women and men. That has not gone away. You know, there have been some advances, but it really has not fully gone away yet. Men still make more than women in the marketplace, right? And so many issues for us to look at in terms of um, equality and consideration of the feminine, and are how is there a movement, I think, in the collective to cut us off from the feminine, right? To almost destroy the feminine. And when we look at um, what happened in the recent election and the names that women, Black women, women, white women, all women can be called in public. Um, and it's okay. Like it's acceptable that that can happen. And the disrespect for the feminine, right? So I just think that we got to keep the water stirring. That's the thing, right? We have to do that. Yeah. Um, okay, I want to share, I'm just checking the time, like maybe 2 or 3 more pieces. Like, how is this for you? How is it? Yeah, this is a good format for us. Okay, good. Um, would you like a 5-minute break? No? I see Jillian's hands like this. Okay, here's what we'll do. How many would like a 5-minute break? Raise your hand and then we'll go. Oh, okay. So I think we're a little outnumbered, Holly. So take a break if you want like an eco break, but we're gonna stay together. Yeah? Okay. Um, so this next piece that I want to read is a little bit longer. Than others I've read, but I want to read it because it really it touches me and it touches um, a nerve in me about something that is a part of our American psyche, um, a part of our history that runs so deep inside of us, inside of our racial psyche, um, and can still be there. So this piece is by someone named Haywood Patterson, and it's from a book called The Scottsboro Boy. Alabama, 1931. The freight train leaving out of Chattanooga, going around the mountain curves and hills of Tennessee into Alabama, it went so slow anyone could get off and back on. That image reminded me of individuals coming from South America, Latin America on the trains coming, trying to get a better life in America. When I first read that section about the train, that gave the white boys the idea that they could jump off the train and pick up rocks, carry them back on, and chunk it at us Negro boys. The trouble began when 3 or 4 white boys crossed over the oil tanker that 4 of us colored fellows from Chattanooga were in. One of the white boys, he stepped on my hand and liked to have knocked me off the train. I didn't say anything then, but the same guy, he brushed by me again and liked to have pushed me off the car. I caught hold of the side of the tanker to keep from falling off. So they're on a moving train, right? I made a complaint about it, and the white boy talked back, mean, serious. White folks, Southern talk. That is how the Scottsboro case began, with a white foot on my black hand. The next time you want by, I said, just tell me you want by and I will let you by. Nigga, I don't ask you when I want by. What you doing on this train anyway? Look, I just tell you the next time you want by, you just tell me you want by, and I let you by. Nigga bastard, this a white man's train. You better get off. All you black bastards better get off. I felt we had as much business stealing a ride on this train as those white boys, hoboing from one place to another, looking for work like us. But it happens in the South. Most poor white folks feel they are better than Negroes, and a black man has few rights. It was wrong talk from the white fellow, and I felt I should sense it into him and his friends. We were human beings with rights too. I didn't want that. I didn't want that my companions, Roy and Andy Wright, Eugene Williams, and myself should get off that train for anybody unless it was a fireman or engineer or railroad dick who told us to get off. You white sons of bitches, we got as much right here as you. Why, you goddamn nigga, I think we better just put you off. Okay, you just try to put us off. 3 or 4 white boys, they were facing us 4 black boys now, and all cussing each other on both sides, but no fighting yet. The white boys were up the train further. We had just come out of a tunnel underneath Lookout Mountain when the argument started. The train, the name of it was Alabama Great Southern. It was going uphill now, slow. A couple of the white boys, they hopped off, picked up rocks, threw them at us. The stones landed around us and some hit us. Then the white fellows, they hopped back on the train 2 or 3 cars below us. We were going toward Stevenson, Alabama, when the rocks came at us. We got very mad. When the train stopped at Stevenson, I think maybe to get water or fuel, we got out of the car and walked along the tracks. We met up with some other young Negroes from another car. We told them what happened. They agreed to come in with us when the train started again. Soon as the train started, the 4 of us Chattanooga boys that was in the oil tanker got back in there, and the white boys started throwing more rocks. The other colored guys, they came over the top of the train and met us 4 guys. We decided we will go and settle with those white boys. We went toward their car to fight it out. There must have been 10 or 12 or 13 of us colored when we came on a gang of 6 or 7 white boys. I don't argue with people. I show them. And I started to show those white boys. The other colored boys, they pitched in on those rock throwers too. Pretty quick, the white boys began to lose in the fist fighting. We outmanned them in hand-to-hand scuffling. Some of them jumped off, and some we put off. The train, picking up a little speed, that helped us do the job. A few wanted to put up a fight, but they didn't have a chance. We had color anger on our side. The train was picking up speed, and I could see a few Negro boys trying to put off one white guy. I went down by them and told them not to throw this boy off because the train was going too fast. This fellow, his name was Orville Gilly, me and one of the right boys pulled him back up. After the ghillie boy was back on the train, the fight was over. The four of us, Andy and Roy Wright, Eugene Williams, and myself, we went back to the tanker and sat the same way we were riding when the train left Chattanooga. The white fellows got plenty sore at the whooping we gave them. They ran back to Stevenson to complain that they were jumped and thrown off, and to have us pulled off the train. The Stevenson depot man, he called up ahead to Paint Rock and told the folks in that little through road place to turn out in a posse and snatch us off the train. It was 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon, Wednesday, March 25th, 1931, when we were taken off at Paint Rock. A mob of white farmers was waiting when the train pulled in. They closed in on the boxcars, their pistols and shotguns pointed at us. They took everything black off the train. They even threw off some lumps of coal, could be because of its color. Us 9 black ones, us 9 black ones, they took off from different cars. Some of these Negroes I had not seen before the fight, and a couple I was looking at now for the first time. They were rounding up the whites too, about a half dozen of them. I noticed among them 2 girls dressed in men's overalls and looking about like the white fellas. I asked a guy who had hold of me, "What's it all about?" "Assault, an attempt at murder." I didn't know then there was going to be a different kind of a charge after we get to the Jackson County seat, Scottsboro. They marched us up a short road. We stopped in front of a little general store and post office. They took our names. They roped us up, all us Negroes together. The rope stretched from one to another of us. The white fellas, they looked mighty serious. Everybody had guns. The guy who ran the store spoke up for us. "Don't let those boys go to jail. Don't anybody harm them." But that passed quick because we were being put into trucks. I kind of remember this man's face, him moving around there in this storm of mad white folks talking for us. There are some good white people down south, but you don't find them very fast. Them that will get up in arms for a Negro. If they come up for a Negro accused of something, the white people go against him and his business goes bad. I'm going to skip a section. We got to Scottsboro in a half hour. Right away, we were huddled into a cage, all of us together. It was a little 2-story Jim Crow jail. There were flat bars, checkerboard style around the windows, and a little hallway outside our cell. We got panicky and some of the kids cried. The deputies were rough. They kept coming in and out of our cells. They kept asking questions, kept pushing us and shoving, trying to make us talk, kept cursing, saying we tried to kill off the white boys on the train, stomped and raved at us and flashed their guns and badges. We could look out the window and see a mob of folks gathering. They were excited and noisy. We were hot and sweaty, all of us, and pretty scared. I laughed at a couple of the guys who were crying. I didn't feel like crying. I couldn't figure what exactly, but didn't have no weak feeling. After a while, a guy walked into our cell, with him a couple of young women. "Do you know these girls?" They were the 2 gals dressed like men, rounded up at Paint Rock, along with the rest of us brought off the train. We had seen them being hauled in. They looked like the others, like the white hobo fellas to me. I paid them no mind. I didn't know them. None of us from Chattanooga, the Wrights, Williams, and myself, ever saw them before Paint Rock. Far as I knew, none of the 9 of us pulled off different gondolas and tankers ever saw them. No, everybody said. No, I said. No, you damn liar niggers. You raped these girls. That's from Hayward Patterson, who was one of the young boys taken off of the train, and they were one of the Scottsboro 9 that became a famous incident because it moved into the courts. And eventually, several of these young boys were freed, but many of them spent years in jail and were not freed. Some of them were given quote unquote pardons for what they had supposedly done in supposedly raping these 2 white girls in that small southern town or on the train. So I think that I am so touched by this because it reminds me of Medgar Evers. It reminds me of young Black boys who were killed. It reminds me of the writings, Baldwin's writings, James Baldwin writings, and the writings of Black men coming out of the Harlem Renaissance, right? Black boy, right? So anything you'd like to say? I know that's a bit longer than the other readings. We have maybe 2 or 3 more. Central Park 5. That's exactly right. And the person who is the so-called president of the United States now took out his full-page New York Times ad and advocated for their death, right? So we could say the more things change, the more they stay the same. So
I don't know what anyone else is feeling right now. I love to hear about the feeling because and I think a lot of our education around race in this country has been through the intellect. And like Selena brought up, there's something that gets experienced when you really let it in into an embodied place. And the rage and deep well of sadness sits at the core in hearing and experiencing. And as you're reading, it's all playing out, and I can envision it, I can see it, I can feel that hopelessness pushed against a wall. What were we meant to do? Of course, we had to fight. And here we are, no matter what, class, race, whiteness wins. And it's just enraging and so goddamn sad. And it's and we've got to feel it. We've got to let it be felt. And I say this as someone who, being educated in white schools, hearing these in white settings, it was too hard to let in because it didn't feel safe to feel in those places. In a lot of ways, it was a little humiliating to be looked at by white peers as if, wow, you. And as a younger person, just so hard to let it in because there was nowhere for it to go. And now, once again, with getting older and realizing that I can let it in, and I don't know if it has to go anywhere as much as it's really important for me to let it in and to feel and just to feel it. So, yeah, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Yeah, let's talk about our feelings, right? Right from the beginning today, our first speaker, Stella, talked about how hard it was, right? I mean, how intense it was, the first reading, right? I'm talking about a Holocaust, right? And the threads that get woven through what I'm reading today, it is about shadow, right? It is about the hardness of shadow and the forgetfulness of shadow and the pain of shadow. It's hard. This is hard work. And so many of you are clinicians, right? So many of you have gone through the training to learn how to hold sadness, to learn how to hold suffering, to hold your own suffering, and to be in that spiritual, that temenos, that sacred space around holding the suffering of another, right? So we are acclimated to suffering. And when we hear about the story, uh, Hayward Patterson's story as a young boy, a teenage boy. This is happening during the Depression, right? So people are riding trains, right? Going town to town, hoboing, as it was called, right? And yet the thread of the sadness and the despair around what happened to them, that does not go away. And people who are in states of poverty and despair are still hopping on trains. We're still hopping on trains to get to freedom, get to America, to get some kind of salvation, right? So this is 1931, and we're in the 21st century. And so when Jung talked about how complexes don't go away, it's like suffering doesn't go away. Our despair doesn't go away. The work is always meeting it, right? The work is meeting it. The laws, the jury system got looked at so intensely because of this case, right? Because it brought to national awareness how biased and how racist the jury system was. We're still dealing with not so much the jury system, but with jurisprudence in America. Like, what is justice in America for Black and Brown people? We had a man taken to El Salvador, imprisoned, and because they came and took him, right? We're looking at the actions of ICE, right? Like we're looking at immigration and how brown people are being attacked and how they are being displaced. And I'm not in favor of, let me put this disclaimer, I'm not in favor of gangs hurting people. I'm not in favor of that. I'm not in favor of individuals being destroyed in their lives, people who are wanting to just raise their children, create love in the world, not in favor of the destruction of people who want to improve their lives, right? I mean, I'm not in favor of going against them. And I am also not in favor of people being taken out of the country, separated from their families, children disrupted from families again, put in cages, all of this kind of insane madness that we see happening. And I love that certain people are standing up and certain companies, Costco, and I don't like it that certain companies didn't stand up, right? And I like it that certain individuals are standing up and that others won't, that they bend the knee, right? So anyway, I won't say any more now. I see Selena's hand up. So Selena, yes, you're muted, so unmute yourself. Yeah.
Thanks. You just spoke right to what was coming up for me. Really, it's very alive in me right now. And that idea of like everything stays the same, and in so many ways the exact same thing is still happening. And the part that I have a really hard time wrapping my mind around is that when we hear a story like this, we can sort of see it objectively, I think. You know, I feel like most of us can look at that and see what is wrong and can identify what exactly about it was wrong. And as it unfolds in real time, I can't wrap my mind around that piece where people would, I can see how in the sort of dangers of the depths of the darkness of the shadow, it feels easier to try to look away or to try not to identify with that part and, you know, say to ourselves, well, that's not me, or I am different, or that wouldn't happen to me because I am good. But that's not good enough. Yeah. And so it's just, I think, alarming how alive it is and how so many people really want to believe that it's better now and things are different now and things are good now. And that's not what's happening now. It's different. But it's really just not. My partner was just trying to get his attention a moment ago. His name is Fernando. And he's suffered, he's brown like me, but browner. And there's colorism within our community as well. And so both he and I in our families sort of earned the names. His nickname is Negro and my nickname was Negrita. So like, there's no good way to say that in English. Our families meant it as an endearment, but it was a nod to like the fact that we get too dark. And what that, at least these days, very literally puts us in danger of, just because of the way we look, just because we have tattoos, and it doesn't matter what our education is or what we fight for. So this story feels really alive.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you, Selena. It is real. And it goes back to what Tanya was saying about our emotional bodies, right? I think about our emotional bodies and how much we have to bear. Like we have to bear so much because of the bodies that we're in. And when we get thrones like Patterson thrown at us, we get those stones, those rocks thrown at us. It's like people think that we should be able to bear it, right? That we should be able to bear our families being separated, our children put in cages, that we should bear being called all kinds of awful names, you know, that we should be called, that we should bear being stoned to death in a way, because it does stone our spirit, right? Like people trying to kill off our spirit, because that's what that's about. And we survive, and we will survive this last phase. I have faith in that, right? Yeah. So, and it hurts. I don't take that away, right? So it's being able to hold the suffering while we have faith in the future, because that's to me the way of the stirring, right? Yeah. Thank you, Selena. Yeah. Yeah. Maggie.
Sorry. I
That's
think
a,
you can hear now. Okay.
yeah.
Every time I'm in these type of meetings, there's this a trepidation, that preparedness that I feel that I have to put on because there's always this um sort of a despair at the end of the session, right? Because it's so complex and so deep, and it's very I appreciate the optimism that you have. Me, on the other hand, is feeling so overwhelmed by the complexity of this.
Mhm.
And I recently shared in class um, that perhaps for the first time in my life that I had this like deep, profound feelings. This is more like last quarter, how I have to, that I can kind of connect with um, like the Jewish people back in the days where you have to wear the Star of David patch and the tattoo on your arm.
Mhm.
Like now, like I feel like I have to wear that and to have a passport number on my arm just to make us sort of a safety thing. And that feeling was profoundly, um, it's not just sadness or fear, but rather that despair. Um, and it's also pretty saddening that while I was thinking about all that or just having that felt experience, it's interesting how the first thing I associate with that despair is the Jewish experience and not necessarily the American Black history. And that was an interesting thing for me to notice. And I just wonder how much we really are able to put ourselves in those experiences, just because I feel like the society has quote unquote market a group of people, but maybe not the others. And the last thing I want to say is, as an Asian American, it's always been very difficult to pin where we fit in all of this because we're, not to say it's easier or harder. I don't think we can ever compare people's felt experience just because everyone experienced differently. Um, but the othering part, even in these conversations, sometimes it's like, where do we fit? Because a part of it is we do have a lot of American history that we're discussing, but a lot of Asians, they're here because they were also running away or their families ran away from something very similar. Um, and that generational experience and trauma, I don't think people are really spending a lot of time thinking about it either, because it's so hard to deal with that. So I don't know what I'm saying. This is just what I'm, since Tanya kind of talked about the feelings part, I thought it would be something I like to just kind of comment on. So
Yeah. I thank you, Maggie. I think it's beautiful what you commented on and what you're saying. And it brings us a deepening in how we need to reflect on how in America we are made up of so many different parts of us. And it is so complicated. I think it's so complex. And like, I just think it's going to take us more generations and more and more and more to tease out all the complexities of how we have come together to be American. In a way, I think it's a gift that we have this kind of crazy mixed up thing that we have that's America, right? And I call it crazy because times it's totally crazy. And Matt referenced psychosis. People talk about a white psychosis. We talk about the suffering of being American. And then people wanting to mark us as not being good enough, being American. And sometimes in my own experiences, like I've had individuals approach me as if I'm not American. And I claim that because my ancestors worked in plantations for hundreds of years. And if I'm not American, who's American, right? Somebody that arrived maybe 5 years ago that speaks with a thick accent of wherever they're from, usually Eastern European. That's usually the kind of encounters that I would get that would be negative towards me. And want to disrespect me or not like treat me as a human being. And so that those kinds of encounters make me want to claim, take my stand, honor my ancestors who father, brothers went off in American wars and came back home and still were treated poorly because they were Black men, right? Who went off to die if they did, if they would have, for America, right? But still could be biased against. And yeah, so I see your hand, Shai. So yes, and then I'm gonna read a piece in reflecting what Maggie was talking about. Yeah.
It's really interesting that you brought up like being American,
Mm.
as because it's this conversation, I believe, came up. I was at an event and it was a comedian who was speaking on being American. And it was just really interesting because I often have conversations with myself, but ultimately it's like when I hear like about this celebration of being American, and at some point I just was like, oh, I've never had that, patriotic mindset. What is that? What, you know what I mean? I've never really felt like America gave me freedom, freedom to the extent of probably a white person, right? We have different experiences. And so my American experience is an American experience, but I think that that's why sometimes I use the term Black instead of African American. I mean, I think it's so much more complex than kind of what everyone is saying. Is it is complex. It's so convoluted. The layers of understanding between the many generations of what we've been having to hold on to spiritually, and it shows in our bodies. And kind of you bringing up, Black women and having issues, with birth, like certain things like that. It's still, this somatic experience that we're still having. So it's just really interesting because I feel like if there was an interview of a bunch of modern Black people, African Americans, you ask them about what does it mean to be an American, you will get so many different answers, but then you would probably also find that like, it's like, I don't know. I just always felt like that I was never even a part of the conversation, or like, it wasn't really something for me to even be proud of. I have to go seek safety. I have to go and mind my Black business. Like, I don't know. That's not something I even care about. But now
Yeah.
that I understand it's something much deeper than that, it's like, I do want to be proud to be an American. And I do love being here. There's a lot of other places that might seem great. And there's this dichotomy of being like, yes, America is great. But then also is this a psyop? Like, what's happening? Because it's like, I feel like we're being sold that America is great. And it's like, I don't know if it's ever really been that great, and to an extent, right? But you'll see a lot of people, especially people of color, are moving out of the country because we're like, there's just other equalities that we can experience that maybe we haven't been able to experience yet in America. But yeah, it's a very interesting time. And I find that we could all, agree that our suffering is different. But I believe that we start with understanding that we all have these rough patches to go through, our own ancestral healing to do. Even white people, it's like, your suffering is different from my suffering, but it's still suffering. And I can't dismiss that you are still maybe dealing with mental health issues or having some sort of, issue that you must address. But yeah, I'm like, I'm about to go into like this meeting at 1, and I'm on the streets of like Beverly Hills, and I'm just seeing, people with the Israeli flag, and then people are honking, and I'm just like, it's so crazy, this world. It's so fascinating because it's like, wow, different experiences really do map out the way that we view the world, and it's just interesting. But yeah, anyway, yeah, thank you for bringing up the American part.
Yeah, it's so, thank you. I think it is so extremely complicated. And I think, as Tanya and many of us here understand, the older you get, and if you're into consciousness and deepening consciousness, like you start realizing the complexity of it. It's not like, oh yeah, like I say Africanist, right? I chose that word Africanist, right? I use it in my writing. It's an acknowledgement of the ancestors that I descended from. It's an acknowledgement of that part of me, of my cultural group. I can also say American because I've been here. I've been here. My spirit, my ancestors' spirits, like, if this is America, then I'm American. And when I travel, um, it depends on where I go, but sometimes people think I'm African. Like in Rome, I was treated initially like always as African, and it wasn't always the nicest treatment, I have to say, right? It could be biased. In London, I've had some instances of racist experiences. It happens. And yes, there are a lot more people of color, especially Black people, that are going out of America and going other places. And I'm still here because my roots are here, and my ancestors paid a lot, a lot, a lot for me to be here. So, and a part of claiming the American part, that Americanism part, is because a part of the psychology that I believe in says that you don't deny any aspect of yourself, right? You're constantly working to look at your personal shadow, to look at the collective shadow, to look at the cultural group shadow. Like, so in that willingness to accept looking as deep as I can into consciousness, like I'm gonna be rooted, right? I want to be grounded. I want to be solid with that and centered with that. So thank you, Shahia. Yeah, and it's so complicated. It's so like astoundingly complicated. And I love that we get to be with each other and talk about the complexities of it, because this is what it takes to stay in the waters. This is what it takes to look into the deep pool and say, whoa, that's pretty scary down there. I don't even know who I am. I don't even know what's going on. To be able to own a lack of knowing is wonderful, because then you can discover something. Then there's room for discovery, right? Okay, I'm going to read 2 more pieces before we come to an end for today, I think. Let me just double check the time. Okay. So this is a short piece, not very long, from someone named David Parks, who wrote a book called GI Diary. Vietnam, 1967. April 24th, 1967. Went to Saigon for 3 days to see the Bean Doctor. Damn, what a place. The women are beautiful and the soldiers live high on the hog. Went to a few nightclubs and wound up with a fine Vietnamese dish. A fantastic evening. The guys stationed there really have the life. No wonder the war is lasting so long. The officers and non-coms don't want to give up the kind of living they have up there. Saigon is full of young men running around on motorbikes. I wonder why they aren't out here fighting with us. May 8th, 1967. In the hospital again. Same old jazz. The shrapnel wound in the bean department. A big lump keeps forming and they keep lancing it. God, some of the things you see here. One guy came in so badly shot up, he tried to kill himself with a knife. I held him down while the medic put him out with a needle. An ARVN came in this morning with a foot blown off, dripping blood all over the floor. He didn't say anything or cry out, probably just wondering where he would get another foot. Hope I don't have to go through anything like that. The rains have started. Nothing but rain for the next 4 months, they say. My company is with the engineers building a temporary base on the plain of reeds. Everything out there is underwater. After that, we'll be on security and patrols. Lot of thinking. Oh, sorry, May 15th, 1967. Lot of thinking lately. The people I love, war, sex, and what have you. Frankly, I'm mixed up. The stateside news bugs me. On the one hand, you have Stokely Carmichael saying Negroes shouldn't be fighting for this country. On the other hand, some Negro leaders think just the opposite. I doubt that most of them have ever been to war. One thing's for sure, I have been, and I'm fed up with it. This war is pointing up a lot of my mistakes. It's like the old man kept on telling me, Champ, it looks like you're going to have to learn the hard way. If I get out of here in one piece, I'm going to be a different man. If you want to get something out of life, you're going to have to grab it and hold on to it. When I was in school before, I didn't realize this. I'm greedy now, and I don't think anything will step in my way. Hope to be back with the fellows tomorrow. David Parks from a GI Diary, Vietnam, 1967. So I'll just say that when I graduated high school in 1967, and during those years, I lived in Bedford-Stuyvesant in New York. It's where my family moved to when they came from South Carolina, my parents. And it was deeply disturbing, sad to see how many young Black men came back from Vietnam and were addicted. So drugs in my community was very strong. And as I marched against the war in Vietnam, I felt that and hoped that I was marching for something that was going to make my community, those men, and the young men that were my age that were still in Vietnam, as I went off to college in the fall, make it better for them. So, you know, Maggie, as you talk about being Asian, I remember, I was say I don't forget, but I remember Dr. Martin Luther King's stand against the war in Vietnam and how he was for saving people, all kinds of people, right? And how Vietnam was once again a real issue for America in terms of raciality and racism. And it continues. So I'll stop there. Any response from anyone, though, if anyone wants to say anything? And then I'll read one more quote from Dr. King. Okay. I'll read this quote. It's from Dr. King. It's also from 1967, Atlanta. It's from one of his speeches, Where Do We Go From Here? I'm going to read a paragraph from this. And I say to you, I have also decided to stick to love, for I know that love is ultimately the only answer to mankind's problems. And I'm going to talk about it everywhere I go. I know it isn't popular to talk about it in some circles today. I'm not talking about emotional bosh when I talk about love. I'm talking about a strong, demanding love. And I have seen too much hate. I've seen too much hate on the face of sheriffs in the cell. I've seen hate on the faces of too many Klansmen and too many white citizens, counselors in the cell to want to hate myself, because every time I see it, I know that it does something to their faces and their personalities. And I say to myself that hate is too great a burden to bear. I have decided to love. If you are seeking the highest good, I think you can find it through love. And the beautiful thing is that we are moving against wrong when we do it, because John was right. God is love. He who hates does not know God, but he who has love has the key that unlocks the door to the meaning of ultimate reality. Dr. Martin Luther King. Okay, so I'll just take a few closing words from you for today. Anything you'd like to say for how we've been together and how you felt connected, how you have felt disconnected, how you want to be more connected with self-love, with others, with being strong, like King talks about Bosch, right? Like not emotional Bosch, because all of you know about that, but about love, right? How you do self-care, how we hold each other's hands in circles of care, because that's what we have to do. Yeah. Anything you'd want to say as we close today?
Well, I'll say that, Dr. Brewster, thank you. I feel deeply humbled
Oh,
and, sticking with and staying with the complexes. As you said, they don't go away. It's about meeting them. And, you know, love, I always put forth as not just a feeling, it's an action. Like it is an action. It's something that we're generally called to do. And part of the humbling is being with the complexity of it all. And my personal history is that of an Afro-Caribbean who was raised in the States. So I'm always kind of bifurcated and trying to figure out how I fit into the Black American experience, like culturally, but ancestrally. My folks and people are from Jamaica. But sitting with the complexity of the choices that are on offer through the lens of culture, of race, of ethnicity, gender, class. And with the complexity, it's just substrate, under substrate, under substrate. You keep digging. And it's like there is no out, there's only through. And so I'm just feeling deeply humbled and sitting and floating in this river of complexity and choice making. And knowing that, yeah, the river will move when I'm no longer here. It's been here long before I arrived, and I just find myself like still in the complexity. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Tanya. I love those words, the river of complexity. Can I use it? Yeah. Okay. Thank you. I think I'd like to write something about that based on your title, what you've said, and our experiences today, right? And what you've said and bringing our energy to this moment. Yeah. Yeah, thank you. Okay. Aya, I'm sorry, Shaya.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Brewster. This has just been so eye-opening, and I feel like as I'm starting my journey, there's so many aha moments that I've already had, and I'm only taking a prerequisite right now. So it feels so aligned to my purpose and my interests. But to end with quotes of love by Dr. Martin Luther King was just really beautiful. And it reminds me of how I keep my own self in check and how I align my emotional intelligence with every hard decision, with every easy to hard decision that I have. Jim Quick wrote the book Limitless, and there's a part of the book where he talks about how he helps people pretty much remember long scripts or just memorizing, reading and comprehension as you go. He talks about this moment where he goes with Will Smith to be on set to help him remember this huge script of him being a superhero, and he's helping him through the process. There's this part of the book where he talks about having how sometimes we ask ourselves disempowering questions, and so he likes to pretty much make it that you ask yourself an empowering question, and you have this question or you ask yourself this question specifically catered to you when you are going through a hard decision or you're finding it really difficult to really come through with your authentic self. And I decided to create my own question that really gets down to the bottom of how I decide to do things. And it's, what would love do? And to me, it was just like, wow, because we have our own perception of what the world is. And, sometimes we're blinded by the experiences that we've already had that really led us to believe that something is happening, but sometimes that's not really what's happening. And so it allows me to get to the bottom of how I want to show up. It's not about what I should do. It's how do I want to show up every single time I'm in a situation where it's complex. It's so complex. And the only thing I need to do is to remember, how do I want to not be remembered for validation, but just how I feel good about how I show up. And at the end of the day, when I ask myself that, the anger, the frustration, whatever type of judgment, whatever's going on in my conscious brain, it kind of keeps me centered and be like, you know what? Even if I have a hard moment, of a complex moment that maybe I am angry. Maybe it's a uncomfortable or negative feeling that I'm trying to process. I think I put myself in a situation of just being like, you know what? I think at the end of the day, if you let people know that you care about their feelings and that you respect them, that at the end of the day, you can be upset and not okay or aligned with what someone's saying, but you can also just be um, gracious and kind in those moments. And I understand some people don't resonate with that, and I feel like that doesn't really have anything to do with me, but for this particular moment, it really does. What would love do brings you back to the big picture, because we all love seeing kindness. We see it on social media. We're all tearing up and you're like, why am I crying? I'm just scrolling. And it's like, we desire to feel that feeling, to have that connection. And we have to show up as that if that's something that we want to experience. And that's just something that people forget when they are having negative feelings towards complex situations. So yeah, it just reminded me of that, and it keeps me in check and keeps my emotional intelligence balanced and aligned. But yeah, thank you so much for this discussion. It was wonderful.
Oh, thank you. And thank you for your participation. It was also wonderful. Thank you. Yeah. Stella.
Yeah, thank you for preparing and facilitating and lecturing this beautiful course. And every time like when I listen to this kind of lecture, my heart is like, widely broiled, and there's this turmoil is going on, and I want to do something. I want to be an advocate, but how? It's really, what should I do right now, right here, to make all the nation, all the world, all the people on this planet be aware of this issue, this suffering, and eventually what I'm at is like, we should remember it first. Sometimes, life is easy, then we forget, and when life is not easy, we focus on the problems of our own, and this kind of like um, big agenda is, sometimes forgotten and not prioritized. So I think it's really important for us to remember this is like essential issue of our being that needs to be healed in a collective level. So I think it's really good idea to have a daily ritual or like a weekly ritual that we can remember this. So it stays always here. And I'm so grateful of the people who documented and made a voice, and so that we, whenever we like Google, we research for the like sources of this kind of movement, it's there. But it's there because someone did it before, although it was not successful, although they didn't get much attention, but it was there. So right now, we are searching it. Oh, there are movements in 1950s, 60s, 70s, and that gives us kind of hope. And that makes me to realize that whatever small things that I do right now, either like posting something on, Facebook or whatever, social media, and educate,
Mhm.
spread this idea, and, make all the nation know and be aware of it. That's such an important part of our movement.
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you, Stella. And as you were talking, I mean, I was thinking about how we are the seeds, right? Like we are the seeds that get dispersed in the world, in our groups, with others. Like we do that through writing, through Googling something and looking at what someone's done and say, "Oh, wow, that happened." What it gives you an idea for something, right? And honestly, I'll say, like, when I got up this morning, I didn't know that I was going to be using this book for us today. And yet, this book became kind of the frame for the work today. I didn't know it. When I discovered this book, like I said, I wasn't even looking for this book, right? So the things I was going to do today, maybe read some poetry, do all of those things, it didn't happen because our conversations and the words of the individuals from this book had dominance. And I think that's how it should be. Within myself, though, I think like I'm open to discovery. I want new things to come to me. And I could get scared. I could be afraid. It doesn't mean that I'm going to shut down to new experiences or consider myself like I'm one of the seeds that got scattered, that got dispersed, right? So in being here today, like my faith is that whatever we've talked about, whatever has come up in each side of you, that you will then transmit it. You become a seed, right? That is in the earth. You share it with others. And we are out constantly sharing ourselves as seeds that just get thrown out, for more. Yeah, for more growth, for more evolution. Yeah. Yeah. So I deeply thank you. Um, I'm gonna give you if I can do it, can I give some hearts? I want to do hearts. There. Okay, there they go. Thank you to each one of you for spending time with me on your Sunday afternoon. Take good care. We have our hearts and our energy focused on love for LA. And for those of you who live there, and for those of us living everywhere, right? Because we want the love, we need the love, and we're going to keep that. So thank each one of you for showing up today. I hope to see you another time. All right. Thank you.